and roll, Chicago. Rock and roll, Chicago, my hometown. Well, I was born in the city, gonna rock your city, Chicago. Chicago rock and rollers are the best year around.
This is Paul Martin
And Ray the Roadie.
for the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.
So, got a lot of great comments from people about the Tommy Shekel interview. It's very insightful and quite entertaining.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Tommy's quite a character, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. So this week, we met up with a couple other characters. Who was that?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We met up with Kevin and Keg Giragosian.
Those are the Neverly Brothers.
Right. Had a nice interview with them and found out a little more insight into their band.
Their band and into rock and roll kind of overall from the 50s into the 60s. Kevin's quite the historian.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He knows his stuff when it comes to that.
Yes, he does. That's what makes the Neverly Brothers what they are.
Yes, it does. Let's get right into the interview right now, and give it a listen to see what it's all about.
And away we go.
Hey, this is Paul Martin
And Ray the Roadie.
for the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.
This week we're meeting with Kevin and Keg Giragosian. Giragosian. I got it wrong.
Almost.
All right. Well, the Neverly Brothers. How you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us on the show.
Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming out.
Sure thing.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started, and I know you were in the Wombats before, and that did that progress into what you are doing now, or no?
No, it was really the Wombats was a group that I started in 1988, and it went through 2005. It was an original project. I was. This is Kevin, by the way. Speaking for all of you out there. My brother Keg sitting next to me on my right side. So I started it in '88, and then it went through many different lineups over 15 years, and it became a serious original music project. I was a songwriter, lead singer, put out an album, put out an EP. Nothing ever happened, so we became a cover band and didn't really make it very far. In that latter period, I started dabbling in the music of the Everly Brothers and the Beatles, and I got into the Everly Brothers, and a friend of mine kind of turned me on to them, and then all of a sudden it was like this clicked something in me that I loved the Beatles, and I found out the Everly Brothers were the Beatles' inspiration as singers. Sure. So, in fact, the Beatles used to call themselves the Four Everly Brothers for a while. It was one of their nicknames amongst themselves. So that kind of pulled this idea together, and next thing you know, in the beginning, in 2003, started doing a lot of Everly Brothers and a lot of Beatles songs. And it was a lot of the sort of rockabilly or folky stuff, the Dylan era Beatles stuff. It was like just the two-part harmonies, and like Babies in Black, and I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, and songs like that. And then the Everly Brothers. So we were doing a lot of Everly Brothers, like 17 Everly Brothers songs, and a bunch of Beatles songs, and then other mix. It was a mixture. The whole concept hadn't gelled of what we would become 3 years after the beginning. But there was this whole sort of two phases to the show. The 50s thing with the Everly Brothers kind of leading it off with the harmonies, and then leading that into the 1964 British invasion.
Right.
But there was no real connection between the two, only the fact that Keg, my brother, was the drummer in the Wombats. Okay. And we had other players, but so he and I basically both started the Neverly Brothers, and we had with an upright bass player.
Now how did the name Neverly come up?
Well, the Neverly came out because I was trying to think of a name that was with Everly, since we were at the time so Everly Brothers oriented, but yet not the Everly Brothers. So it was like Neverly Brothers. And
works out perfect.
Yeah. And then the logo on our bass drum, on Keg's bass drum, is like the Beatles logo on Ringo's bass drum. It's got the big drop letters.
Right.
So that was sort of like, okay, the name is sort of Everly. The visual is kind of a subliminal sign of the Beatles. People kind of grab that, you know. So that was the idea. But the band progressed, and within about 3 years, it became not just Everly Brothers and Beatles and other artists around it, but it became a whole chronological order, a sequence of songs of representing the whole 50s rock and roll, rhythm and blues period, and then the entire good sampling of the entire 1964, 1965 British Invasion bands.
Right. I love the way you work through the evolution of rock and roll, is what you call it, right?
Yes.
And you start out with Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley, right?
Yeah, our whole concept is it's a tour. It's like a virtual tour. Everybody in the audience got into our tour bus.
Okay.
And Paul, you've done shows for us many times.
Right.
We played at the Blue Chip Casino, and you were working the sound there. That's obviously how we got to know each other. So yeah, the whole concept is about this tour. And then in your mind, as a concert attendee, you're in our bus, and now we're going to travel around America. And when you mentioned Johnny Cash and Elvis, the first stop on our tour is always in America, is always Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee, to celebrate that $1 Million Quartet recording session that took place in December of 1956. So we do a little vignette with those four artists: Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis. And then we move on throughout the first set in our tour to go to different cities that represent where the other artists were either from originally or recorded in.
Tell me where we go from there.
Well, okay, why don't you tell me where we go from there?
You mean in the evolution of rock and roll?
Right.
As far as from the 50s and how that segues into the British invasion of our act?
Right.
Like where we're going? Well, it just shows basically how then the 60s British invasion bands were directly influenced by the original rockers of the 50s, the American 50s rockers. And it's evident in all the records we all listened to when we were growing up, like the early Beatles albums. There was always a handful of cover tunes, and it was always Chuck Berry, Carl Perkins,
Motown.
Motown.
Rhythm and blues.
Yeah. Everybody.
So you kind of go up to like the mid 60s, and that's about it, or do you go further?
Pretty much it stops right at the beginning of the British invasion, like 64, 65. So we're doing, and mainly, like I said, we're the songs that we highlight. We do some of their original hits, like for the Dave Clark 5, or we do Because, a soul song, but most of the songs that we're playing by the British invasion artists are the ones that they covered of their American heroes. Right. So like the Stones, we do Route 66.
And Not Fade Away.
Yeah, Not Fade Away. Beatles, we do from the Motown era, we do Smokey Robinson. You Really Got a Hold on Me. You really got. We do that one. So
Rhythm and Blues, Twist and Shout is a great example.
Sure.
That was many people don't know that was originally done 2 years earlier in 1962 by the Isley Brothers here, charting on the Rhythm and Blues charts. But that was the whole idea, like Keg was saying, is that rock kind of died in 1960 in America. A lot of guys were dead. I mean, Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Richie Valens died in a plane crash in 1959. Eddie Cochran died in a car crash in London in 1960. Little Richard became a preacher. Chuck Berry fell out of favor in public. He was cavorting with young women, underage, allegedly. Jerry Lee Lewis married his teenage 13-year-old cousin. So either these guys were self-destructed or they were dead. Right. And there was no rock happening almost in 1960. And then the Beatles and the Stones and these groups picked up all this music and started imitating it. And Twist and Shout is just the perfect encapsulation of what we represent and what our show is all about. The British groups picking up the song and making it even more popular to the masses, taking a song written and recorded by a black artist and on the rhythm and blues chart and taking it into the pop charts, to the mainstream. Right. And that's what those British bands did, and that's what, as Keg was saying, the show is about. The second half is all about highlighting how the British groups were influenced and imitated it and then repopularized these songs to a whole new mass market and mass audience, and their versions were like supercharged versions of it. When you hear the original and you hear theirs, it's always like the Beatles version is so much better sounding than the original. Right. For various reasons. Right.
that's the one most people heard.
Yeah, most of our generation.
They might be familiar with the Isleys, but you heard Twist and Shout how many hundreds of times?
Yeah, that's the song.
Or sometimes, like, you listen to Chuck Berry's original recordings. Half the time, or some of the time, his guitar sounds like it's out of tune, or they just did one take. They really went on a shoestring budget for some of these original American rock and rollers. They didn't really put the production time into it. The levels of the recordings are, off kilter a little bit, but they just, that's great. The guy from the studio or behind the glass wall, he's like, that's great, guys. A cut take, that's it.
Yeah, it was the original Carl Perkins, Honey Don't. It sounds like it falls apart at the end. It's because they were just trying to save as much money as possible. But when the Beatles got into the studio, they were like open pocketbooks. They could do anything as long as they wanted, take their time much more. But also technology had advanced from the 50s to the early 60s.
So how did your idea of doing all this come about?
I really just by getting turned on to like the Everly Brothers. I was never a big 50s guy.
Right.
I knew some of the songs. I knew Buddy Holly, That'll Be the Day, and I knew the songs. But I grew up, I saw the Beatles. I was a real little kid, but I saw them on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964.
Right. As was I.
I was really into that stuff. So the Beatles albums, and we have an older brother who was like 4 years older than me. So he was buying the albums and buying the 45s.
So he's more my age.
He's like, we won't talk about age right now to protect the innocent. But basically, I was really into that. So I was always doing those songs, imitating some of the British songs and Beatles songs. But the Everly Brothers is what kind of just drew me into the 50s, and then it became the harmonies were almost the same as what John and Paul were doing, pretty much. So that's what drew me into the 50s. And then I always liked to, as being in a band, I always liked to talk as the front man about the songs anyway. So it was kind of a natural extension of my personality and as an entertainer, as a person. And now the Everly Brothers drew the direct line to the Beatles. So then we got into all the 50s artists. We thought, this is kind of fun. Let's just pass it around, and each of us were singing different vocal parts and different leads and different backgrounds, and so it was a very vocal group, obviously. Some good examples of the evolution of rock and roll thing, how the British groups borrowed from the American. One of our favorite songs that we play is David Clark 5. We do their version of Do You Love Me?
Okay.
And they did that in 1964. The original version was done in 1962 by the Contours. Do-Wah-Diddy.
Do-Wah-Diddy.
Do-Wah-Diddy-Diddy.
Dum Diddy Do.
Yeah. That was originally recorded in 1963 by an American group called the Exciters. And it wasn't very well received. It didn't sell very well.
The Exciters?
Yeah, they were called the Exciters. They did a song called Tell Him also. Tell him. But it didn't do very well for that group. And it was written by like the songwriters in New York that were writing songs like the Lieber and Stoller guys, that Brill Building. They were a bunch of songwriters. Carole King was part of that group. Her husband, Jerry Goffin. So they were churning out songs that were being recorded by groups, and that was a song that was recorded by the Exciters first. It didn't sell well. Then Manfred Mann from London recorded it in 1964, and it hit the top of the charts. So we love doing that one and selling the background on that one as well.
There she was, just walking down the street singing snapping her fingers and shuffling her feet singing she looked good, she looked fine, she looked
What brought you into just having acoustic guitar, a bass drum, a snare drum, and a stand-up bass?
Well,
I mean, how did that evolve? Or did it actually start out with more?
No, it was less. I started out with just sort of almost acoustic-ish when I was playing it.
Okay.
Because the songs, some of those Everly Brothers songs, some of those Beatles songs, there was a lot of acoustic guitar going on.
Right.
And then on one of our first gigs, I said, "Keg, just bring a snare drum." And we didn't even rehearse. He just said, "Bring a snare drum and just play some rhythm, whatever." And so
he said, yeah. He goes,
make this easy for me.
He said, yeah. He goes, bring some brushes and a snare drum, and we'll just wing it. And I'm like, really? I'm not going to sit down, or not going to use sticks and cymbals, and I'm like, I'll be lost for sure, without pounding that right foot, on the kick drum. so yeah, we did, and it went over great. And
it was at a backyard party of a friend's house. He had a big, he was a part of a company. It was like a kind of a company party. But it was like 150 people there, and we played on his back deck. And this was like 2003. So that was with Keg. He basically did it and just sat in, and then the upright bass seemed to be a natural because
it was just the two of you then.
Well, we had at the moment it was, and then we got a bass player, and it was Craig Gigstad, who you know very well. He played with us for many, many years.
Right.
He retired a couple of years ago from playing. But we also use an electric bass player too. A friend of mine, Gordon Patriarca, who's been on the music scene for many years, but he couldn't play the upright. And as time went on, they were both. We were using both of them. They were both kind of like jobbers. We didn't have an official bass player for the first year and a half, and then as the concept sort of gelled more, we felt that the upright was the thing. It seemed like more what we wanted. It seemed more appropriate for what we were doing. Even though we were doing 60s, it just seemed to be more appropriate because everything we did, we had a little bit of a rockabilly slant, and we were a little bit more rockabilly oriented at the time. So the upright, we offered Craig the full-time position, and he took it. But that's why we liked it, and it just became the staple of what we do.
Well, Craig was very entertaining too.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. We had a lot of fun, but then after, like what Kevin was saying, the first real gig was like a backyard party, and it went over really well. And then for the next show, he was like, "All right, I want you to add a kick drum, and I want you to stand up, just with the snare again only, and the kick, and the brushes, and stand up and do it." And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, And I did it, and it took a little while, a few gigs in practice to get used to standing up and not hunching over my back, and waking up the next morning with my aching back and over my shoulders, and he said, yeah, this is perfect, this is, Kevin said, it was his suggestion to do it, an idea to do the stand up drummer with just brushes and no cymbals and nothing else, and it really, with the acoustic guitar, the upright bass, and then me just adding the simple rhythms, for the songs. It sounded
no
great.
Cymbals.
We all loved it, and sure makes it a lot easier to set up and break down for shows.
Is this something that was stirring inside you, like in the Wombat days? Is this something that you had inside you that you wanted to do eventually? Or?
Not really, no. It was just something that came up. I was kind of getting bored with. And it was depressing what was happening with the Wombats. Over 15 years or 16 years, it went from a cover band right away because it was exciting to play music. I hadn't played music for a while. Keg and I used to have a record store in Orland Park for 10 years, and in the early stages of that, around 88, we opened up the store in 86. In the early stages, when we started getting managers, we could actually both take some time off, and then I started playing music and put the Wombats together, and then right away, within a couple of years, I was writing songs and recording, and we thought we had some connections because of our record store with the music business, but we didn't. It's a total different department. And we soon became, in 1998, we finished the record, I think, or then we released it in like 2000. The full LP or CD, I should say, of the Wombats, and it didn't go anywhere.
And that was all original stuff?
Yeah, all original.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, and then when we play clubs, it would be like mix in, half and half.
Right.
But as time went on, since we weren't getting popular,
I'm very familiar with
you know how that works. Pretty soon you're a cover band throwing one original song in per set, maybe 3 songs a night or 4 or 5, and it was getting sort of like, we thought we had a cool band, but cool band doesn't mean you're popular.
Right.
You're playing like the late 60s, middle 60s, Badfinger, Guess Who, a lot of pop stuff.
Sure.
The Cars, Blonde. We were into pop music from the Beatles. You follow the family tree of pop.
What was the Wombat music like? Or what was your original
one? Well, it was basically
in that same vein.
In the same vein. I mean, I was a songwriter, so I was influenced basically guitar, bass drum guitar with keyboards, and traditional, classic 60s songwriting, verse, chorus.
Right. So now, do you still write?
No, I don't.
No.
I haven't been in that mindset for a long time.
I was just curious. Because sometimes, some guys, I mean, obviously, still have that mindset, like you said, but don't do anything with it. And I was just wondering if you've done any writing since then.
No, a couple of years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, I picked up a pen and started writing notes down and started writing here and there, but I never finished a song. So you have to kind of be inspired to write again, you know. And also with the Neverly Brothers, it's we're doing renditions of all these songs that are, you know, not original songs, but our act is original. So that's the other thing to convey to people is we're not your traditional tribute act where we're impersonators, you know, like a Beatles band. Someone's going to be talking like Paul McCartney or talking like George.
Your act is very original, and I love that about you guys. I love the fact that you just come out there very basic, like we said, and knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Well, people are always amazed that we have a full sound.
Yes.
And you as a sound person know there's 3 guys singing, there's 3 instruments. My acoustic guitar, I don't use an amplifier, and I don't use any particular modifying pedals that modify the sound, like that make it sound like an amp, like a computerized thing. There's just an old pedal board with reverb and delay and equalization pedals, but that's old. And I put a little an acoustic pickup in it. So it's just got its own distinct hybrid electric acoustic sound that I kind of developed for this act.
And you've got some old Beatles guitars too, don't you?
I do. I have the John Lennon and George Harrison both got the acoustic guitar in 1962, the J160 Gibson. That's the one you see with John all the time playing like on a hard night.
Right.
It came with a pickup in it. It was a very rare guitar, or unusual at the time. It came with a pickup put in it and a volume knob and a tone knob, but it sounds horrible. I mean, John used to put electric strings on it, not acoustic strings.
Oh, really?
So I play with acoustic strings, and that pickup doesn't translate very well. So I put an acoustic pickup on it.
Oh, I see.
And it sounds different, and it sounds with my pedals and everything, the way it's through there, the signal. It sounds like an acoustic, but it sounds like an electric at the same time. So I trade off with the rhythm and the leads, you know. And so we have a pretty full sound.
Oh yeah.
And as a nod to Ringo, I play a Ludwig kit. So
I see.
But it's not the oyster color shell, but it's a red sparkle. So it gives a kind of a throwback look to it. You know, that red sparkly '60s look.
I do recall back in the day, towards the end of the Wombats and the beginning of the Neverlys, I remember seeing you guys as the Wombats, and the next week I'd see you as the Neverly Brothers, and then it was the Wombats again. It was just like bam, bam, and all of a sudden, and I like the Wombats. I really like the Wombats, and I mean, I got the albums, and then all of a sudden the Wombats were gone. I was like devastated. I mean, I really liked it.
You liked it because you were old.
I'm still old.
You're still old. You're still old. You got older.
Another disappointed fan.
Yeah. Well, there was a transitional period there. There was there was 16 lineups, or 14 lineups in 16 years of the Wombats. People kept coming and going.
Really?
So every time I started recording, someone would leave, and we'd have to start the whole process of like getting this person into the songs again and teaching them and rehearsing. And then by the time we were ready to record with them, they'd be gone. I guess I was a bad leader. I don't know. But so the recording of the Wombats started in '94, and it didn't end until like '98 or so. Mm-hmm. It took 4 years. It was recorded in various different places, some in my own basement. So that was until from '88 to 2005, and then the Neverlys we started in 2003. So for 2 years, I was booking both bands. I was doing both. Both were my bands. I was doing all the business and promoting and everything. At the time, Keg wasn't doing any promotion. Now he does. He and I both share responsibilities for booking, and then he's got his own responsibilities.
And you had Digging Records too. Right?
And well, Digging Records is my corporation. Oh. It started out as a record label for the Wombats in '95. I incorporated it.
I thought that was what was the name of the record store?
Oh, well, it was Red Tower Records.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
okay.
We had that from '86 to '96.
Well, 51st there.
Yeah, Yeah. So while Kevin started the band, the Wombats, while we had the record store, the Neverly Brothers and Wombats continued after we were out of the record business, and then the Neverly Brothers started in 2003. So 7 years after we closed the record store.
That was the period when we had closed the store in 96, and then we kind of went full time trying to push the Wombats. And so by 2003, that's when the Wombats were really getting depressing. We're really not good. Well, because you're beating your head against the wall trying to get somewhere. You think you got a cool act, like you said. You thought it was a cool band, a lot of cool songs, but I think...
How many pieces was that band?
At the end, it was 5.
Okay.
It was bass, drums, guitar, keyboards, and 2 guitars.
2 guitars, yeah.
And there was 2 sets of brothers in the band.
Yeah.
It was Gordon Patriarca on bass, Jim Patriarca guitar, I was guitar, Keg was drums, and we had a friend named Steve Asham on the keyboards.
Okay.
So we could play almost any rock and roll song, and we had a lot of guys who could sing. We had 4 guys who could sing. So we were doing, we could play Guess Who songs. We could play cool stuff. It was like we were doing some of the one-hit wonder things. I don't know, like Sunshine or Jonathan, whatever his name was. Can't remember his name. We would do Tommy James, the rapper. Different songs where the Mighty Quinn we did. Man for Man. And then I could put my guitar down and I could play the maracas, and so we were very versatile, and we could play a lot of that pop stuff from say 1964 to say 1980,
right,
all the way up to the Cars. We played Just When I Need It, and My Best Friend's Girl. We did Blondie one way or another, even though it was female vocal. So it was fun. But so from 2003 to 2005, the Wombats were doing maybe 3 or 4 shows a month, maybe. And all of a sudden, the Everly Brothers are playing like every Friday and Saturday, pretty much. Then it was like, I don't have time for the Wombats, and I don't really want to. This is good timing. This thing has taken off. It's become something more unique, more appealing. It just became with the public a lot more quickly popular. And
so you went from one and the other without any hesitation, right?
Yeah, it just was like, I was kind of glad that was the end of the Wombats. It was enough of that. It was time, long overdue to put that away. And
it became full-time right away with the Neverly Brothers. It went from just playing a backyard party to a full-time job, and 0 to 60 in a few seconds.
And you turn on Channel 9 in the morning, and there you are. The next day you're on Fox, and then you're on Channel 5.
Yeah, well, we were lucky. We got on the news channels pretty quickly. We started the band in 2003, and by February of 2004, like less than a year later, we were on WGN for the first time. And then since then, between WGN's morning and midday and Fox morning news and Saturday news, we've been on 12 times on the news shows.
Wow.
In our 15 years of being together.
Wow.
Which is more than I know most locally based acts have been. But, once you establish that connection and the contacts, they at certain times want to bring you back, other times they don't, but it's been very good. We've gotten a lot of great exposure from those shows. The last time we were on television was last September on the Good Day Chicago Saturday show.
Oh, okay.
So that was cool. And so and I'm talking to him right now that we may be getting on again this summer for one of our bigger outdoor shows.
So you guys pretty well booked for the summer now, every weekend, or?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, this summer's a little lighter than normal, but typically we do anywhere from 40 to 50 shows in the summertime. That's our busy season. And we're all over, not just Chicago area, we're south. I think the farthest show this summer we're down way near southern Illinois, near Carbondale. Even south of Carbondale, I think a little bit. A little town called DuQuoin.
Yeah, there's a big...
it's a state fair.
State fair,
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
I just found out about it this year. I never even knew. We've been playing the Illinois State Fair in Springfield for 13 years in a row on their free stages, and somebody told me about this, and I contacted them this year, and the woman who was in charge of booking liked it and booked us. So we're down. That's one of the farthest ones, but we travel during the rest of the year. We're playing concert theaters, and we're playing in anywhere from 350 to 1,500 seat theaters, ticketed shows, Midwestern theaters mostly. But we've been to the West Coast, we've been to the East Coast. We've been to Atlantic City, New Jersey, four times in the last 5 years for like 1 month residencies in a theater in a casino.
So they liked you out there.
Yeah.
East Coast, West Coast, they like what you're doing.
They do, and they find us, even though we're here in the Midwest, and you think, as you said, Paul, we have a unique thing. It's an original concept. Doing the show, even though we're performing in classic rock and roll songs, it's an original concept, and it's a stage show. So these people don't find anybody that quite does what we do, even on the coasts, which is encouraging.
That's great. That is great.
Yeah.
Now, who's playing bass with you now?
Right now, a guy named Mike Bradburn. He has been the bass player for a band in Chicago for 25 years called Dolly Varden. And if anybody knows, back in the late 80s, there was a band called Stump the Host. They turned into Dolly Varden. And he gigs with a few other groups periodically, but we're his main thing.
Okay.
And he's also got a full-time job besides, but he's able to make his own hours, so it works out fine.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And he can sing. So he doesn't sing lead, but he can sing nice background harmonies. So Keg and I, as you mentioned, Craig, our old bass player, he used to sing a lot of lead vocals in the first set, the 50s stuff. And Keg, since he retired, Keg has picked up most of his new songs, his leads, and we also use other bass players.
So, yes, thank you.
Keg. That's a high five from Paul and Keg right there for you listening at home.
Across table high five, for you listening on the radio,
for those
on the wireless.
who can't see. So Keg's picked up that, and Mike is able to pick up all the harmonies that we need. So Keg and I do the leads, and he does the harmonies, and we also do harmonies when we're not singing lead.
Right. Tell me about some of the music that you do play.
Sometimes, we try to, the songs we kind of keep to the original spirit of the song, like in the 50s set, but we'll put a little bit of a spin on it, like a Neverly spin onto it sometimes.
Wake up, little Susie, wake up. Wake up, little Susie, wake up. We both been sound asleep. Wake up, little Susie, and weep. The movie's over, it's 4 o'clock, and we're in trouble deep. Wake up, little Susie. Wake up, little Susie.
I know. At least I think you're a big Kinks fan, aren't you?
Big Kinks fan, yes. Major. It's funny. I really didn't get into the Kinks until past the '60s, like around the early '70s. Some friends of mine from Wisconsin, some buddies, turned me on to the Kinks. So my first exposure to the Kinks, besides hearing "You Really Got Me" and some of those songs on the radio, Dale. You're right. Which is Ray Davies in concert. I got into one of my first concerts.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Don't do it again.
Okay.
Well, I got into them like in their 1974-ish time. One of my first concerts was in 1974. I saw the Kinks at the Aragon Ballroom, and they were doing a concept album called Schoolboys in Disgrace, and they were dressed like English schoolboys, and they had a whole horn section. It was when their biggest stage production era. They had like 3 horns, a keyboard, a piano, organ, 3 girl singers, and they're all dressed up in these like schoolboy outfits. And so I got into the Kinks at that point, and then I went forward from there and backwards. Lola was the big song in 1970, which we used to play live. And what Paul refers to is I got to see the Kinks about 9 times, and I became one of my favorite concerts because Ray Davies, their lead singer, was such a great showman and a personality. And during the show, he would always imitate Harry Belafonte at one point, and he'd get the audience to respond. He would go, "Day-o," and they would roar back. And we do that as part of our show. I incorporate that when we play a Kinks song.
I think one of my first concerts I went to, he took me to see the Kinks, and I forget the theater that we went to. It might have been the Uptown or something.
You're coming with me.
Yeah. He says, "Yeah, check this." Well, I was listening to the records already that he had bought. Right. So he took me to the show, and I think it was the Misfits tour. And I remember some guy was hawking, counterfeit T-shirts or whatever out, knockoffs out in front, and we bought a Misfits T-shirt. I had that for years. Finally fell apart. So yeah, I loved it. I really grew up with the Kinks too.
I think it was '78 roughly. It might have been the Uptown Theater. I can't remember exactly.
Oh wow!
But
that's where we saw the Knack too.
But I like the Kinks, but
I think I saw them there then.
But what the funny thing is, I got into the Kinks later in high school, and then I went back in time, but I never got into their '60s, like really their British Invasion albums until the Neverly Brothers.
Right.
The Neverly Brothers really kind of got me and pulled me into all that early stuff because the whole concept is the British bands imitating the American groups.
Right.
So all of a sudden, I'm buying these early albums by the Kinks, 1964 or 65, and I never realized half their albums were cover songs too, just like the Beatles were doing. They're doing like Little Richard stuff, and they're doing blues songs and all kinds of. They did Louie Louie,
right?
Louie Louie. They did. I mean, they did all kinds of stuff. And
the blues were a big influence on a lot of those. On a lot of those bands, the blues was a huge influence.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the Beatles. Like they're
a huge influence on the Beatles.
The blues were, but they took. I think more of their influence came more from like the R&B and the rockabilly that came out of America. Whereas in London, where the Kinks and the Stones were based, the blues really played more of a heavier, influence on them. Because like the Stones, doing all those old blues songs, screaming,
Because I was like 5 or 6 when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, so I was too young to really get into that whole scene and be a record buyer. But now, even later, I didn't get into it. Because I followed the Beatles pop, like I call it the family tree. The Beatles, and then Badfinger, and then the pop songs, and then the power pop of the early 80s, late 70s with the Knack. I saw the Knack in Chicago in '79 at the Uptown Theater.
I saw them there too.
It was like a WLS show or whatever.
That was my first concert that Big Brother took me to.
And then and Blondie and the Cars and there was a lot of obscure like WXRT power pop new wave bands.
Right.
So to me, and they all go back to the Beatles. That's their origin of their sound, their songwriting style. The pop music goes back to that. So
everything does.
Well, everything kind of does.
It kind of does.
The Beatles really kind of just broke all the rules and changed everything. But that's how the Neverly Brothers really kind of brought me into that whole. Really opened my eyes to how much those bands imitated it and what they really started out doing. Besides the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and then the Animals.
Oh yeah.
Now they're from Newcastle, which is way up north in the edge of near Scotland. But I picked up an Animals, like we do their version of Boom Boom, John Lee Hooker song. Right. They recorded in '64. We did Boom Boom was 1961 originally by John Lee Hooker, which is another great example of the evolution of rock. Part of the fun for me is learning these things, and people tell me, wow, you're like a rock and roll encyclopedia. Well, I've always been into rock, and I've always found an interest in it, so I've retained the information. But the Neverly Brothers is what brought me the knowledge.
That's how I introduced Kevin. Is you know him as your rock and roll historian for this evening, and that's what's really cool about we play these songs, and a lot of the same songs from night to night. We'll switch it up, but it's the same artist. We're always doing the $1 Million Quartet, and we'll switch up some of the songs there. But the really cool thing about it is now Kevin went back and researched all this stuff, and I learned about it. The history of the songs and the origins from that. Now, when he's telling the audience, a lot of these people, grew up listening to these artists.
They never
knew that the history
right.
of it or the inspiration behind it. And when they see their reaction on their face, or like, sometimes Kevin will say like a little historical fact about a song about who inspired who or what was going on, and you'll actually hear people gasp like, "Oh,
you guys got a CD out, don't you?"
Yeah, we have. It's kind of a match set, you might say, because we had so many songs we wanted to do that we ended up doing 2 CDs. There were 15 songs on each, and it's called A Magical History Tour.
Nice.
Another little
nice
innuendo.
Play on words.
Yeah, that subliminal thing to give you a thought of Beatles. A Magical History Tour Volume 1 and A Magical History Tour Volume 2. And it's the CDs are just like they mirror the show. The first half of every one of them is the 1950s music that we perform. The second half is the 1964 British Invasion.
Right.
And it's 2 different sets of music, no repeats. And then the booklets inside each also are like the tour. It looks like a tour guide, a bus tour. And there's pictures inside of like a ticket that says the Rock and Roll History Tour. And then where are you going? The next stop is this city. And then I put the song and then the original artist and what year it was recorded, and then the version that was done afterwards. So it'll say like Carl Perkins, 1956.
That's very cool.
Honey Don't, or Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and then it'll say the Beatles, 1964. And so it's fun. I made the whole. I do graphics with a Photoshop program, so I designed the whole CD and set and both sets.
Is this a studio album or is this a live?
It's a studio.
Just all straight.
Yeah, the one thing that's not on it are the narrations, because it's a studio album. And I never, at the time, I didn't think of putting on in between songs, but it does follow a chronological sequence just like the show, and so people usually buy them together because there's
you
so
have
much
them for
music.
sale at your shows, and are they online too? Is it on iTunes or?
Not iTunes, just our website.
Just on your website,
and we also sell them at the shows.
That's NeverlyBrothers.com.
TheNeverlyBrothers.com. You got it.
And where else can we find you on social media?
That's Keg.
We
He's
got
the social
Facebook.
media guy.
We're on Facebook. We just look up the Neverly Brothers.
Right.
Facebook.com/the Neverly Brothers, and we list our shows on both. We have videos on both the website and the Facebook page. And can I just say the Facebook? Yes.
You're very proper.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yes, I'm very
Always
old.
was.
So you can check out everything. Like we have live footage from concerts that we've done at theaters and other events.
Yeah.
So where can we see you in the upcoming weeks? Where you guys can be playing?
Well, next week, the summer shows kick off this weekend, but next week, I'll just say whenever the show's going to air, who knows, but Thursday the 2nd of June, we're playing in Morris, Illinois, just west of Joliet on I-80. It's not that far. It's a courthouse.
That's not far from me.
Come on down.
Yeah,
it's
a little
Come on up
west.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get there by,
It's up from me.
you got to come up north a bit and then west.
It's in front of the Grundy County Courthouse, so come incognito, all right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Paul?
Yes.
I'm
wanted in 14
That's right,
counties.
yeah.
That's right.
Outstanding warrants.
Horse thievery. The website and and Neverly is Neverly, like the word never with an ly. TheNeverlyBrothers.com. But you'll see our shows posted, whether it's a festival or it's a concert in the park or a concert series put on by a municipality or something like that. We're out there all summer long.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having
coming
us,
out.
man.
Thank you.
A lot of great information, a lot of history there.
Yeah.
It's a magical history tour.
Yes, it is. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Good to see you. Well, that was fun, Ray. You were right. Kevin sure is a historian, isn't he? A rock and roll historian.
No kidding. It's amazing. I learned quite a bit of stuff from him just in this short time talking to him.
Yes, as well did I. It was a lot of fun with those guys, too. And we're having fun every week, I think, aren't we?
I think I'm having more fun every week, I think. Yeah, I am. Yeah, no, I'm not thinking. Yeah, I am having a lot more fun. It's, and people are saying some great stuff about the shows, which is much appreciated.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's we're having a lot of fun doing this and going out and meeting bands and band members and getting some insight into their bands and it's a whole lot of fun for us anyway.
Yes.
And we hope it transfers to the listener as well.
Of course. So, who's on deck for next week?
Next week we have Strung Out.
Are they a horn band?
No horn band, but they're more a string band. Thus the name Strung Out.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right. I was just getting a little excited. I thought we were doing another horn band.
Well, we'll find out what they're all about next week. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're on iTunes and Google Music, and we're on Tunity, and we're on iHeartRadio, and we're, you name it, we're everywhere. Just make sure you're liking the podcast and downloading it and enjoying it, and tell your friends.
That's right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week. Strung Out.
See you next week. Thanks for listening.
Rock and roll, Chicago.